Big news week in our town this week, so a special correspondence edition of Off the Record is up next with Kyle Malin, Jordan Hermany, Emily Lawler, and Rick Pluta. The first U.S. Senate debate, a debrief, and a bipartisan effort on election security. Sit in with us as we get the inside out. Off the Record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Martin Waymeyer, a full-service strategic communications agency, partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and public policy engagement. Learn more at martinwaymeyer.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubic.
Here we go. Welcome back. We're having fun this morning, aren't we? Studio C, Friday morning, Off the Record, same as usual, with lots of news going on. And there was a U.S. Senate debate. Let's fact check what went on. By the end of the debate, the studio was overflowing with allegations, he alleging some of her answers were,
I think, is disingenuous and certainly deceptive.
She alleging he got some issues wrong well in Congress.
It's not about what he's going to do, it's what about he's already done.
Mr. Rogers asserts that her support of the Biden federal stimulus relief package post-COVID boosted inflation, which is true, but the more significant contributor to inflation post-COVID was supply chain disruptions. Mr. Rogers alleges that FEMA diverted disaster relief dollars elsewhere.
Diverting that money for illegals coming across the border is an absolute non-starter for me.
But the FEMA rules do not allow disaster relief for other services. He also accused her of supporting Mr. Biden's policies, quote, 100% of the time. She asserts she voted against the administration more than 97% than the other Democrats in the House. However, a check of her voting record in 21-22 shows her backing the president 100% of the time, according to Bridge. Ms. Slotkin accuses her opponent of supporting numerous anti-abortion measures while he was in Congress.
He voted for every single ban, every restriction, every bill that came across his desk.
He wants the states to make abortion decisions now, and regarding Michigan's 2022 vote to legalize abortions here, he adds,
I will do nothing when I go back to Washington, D.C., to do anything that would change what the Michigan Constitution.
He accuses her of signing a secret document regarding a proposed Chinese EV battery in Big Rapids with alleged ties to the Communist Party.
I've never signed an NDA with any Chinese government.
The record shows she did sign local project non-disclosure agreements, but none of those mentioned the Chinese Goshen plant. The two sides declared victory and are now preparing for their final TV debate in Detroit later this month. So, Emily, did you stay awake?
Of course, and they always declare victory, don't they? Both sides, every time.
That's what I would do. Who's there to tell them they're wrong, right?
But no, what I saw on that stage was two really qualified candidates. I think they both have, strong backgrounds, particularly in national security, and I think they were going at each other. It's October. We should expect a lot to be flying, and a lot was flying in terms of accusations.
Ricky, any home runs?
No, I mean, it was sort of balanced off. It seemed like, Mike Rogers in particular started out being, cautious about going too negative too quickly. But then, once it got rolling, then by the end of it, it was, a lot of finger pointing and here's how you did this. And I guess they stayed within the narrow range of what you could call factual, but certainly there was a lot of attempts to, make some stretches. I think the Goshen one, in particular, that with, both of them, that, Mike Rogers saying that you signed an NDA, which was not exactly true, and her saying, there were no NDAs signed with China, but it's not the same as there not being any NDAs.
Well, before we go on, Lauren Gibbons did a great job on fact-checking that thing. I want to give her credit for that. If there was no home runs, any ground rule doubles?
I mean, whenever these debates come up, I'm just always thinking of the fact of what is the average voter going to think or see about this, and I have heard nothing. Frankly, I've heard pretty much. And so, that's, I think, what the campaign should be a little more focused on right now is the fact that, if you are having all of these accusations, all of these finger pointings, all this whatever, are the voters even listening? And is this actually going to move the needle? Because polling suggests that, they're in a pretty statistical dead heat right here. And they have been for some time now.
Well,
go ahead, sorry.
Well, the 1.7 million people supposedly, according to one website, hit and watched the thing. Now, if they were doing something else at the same time.
Or if they stayed the whole time. time. You
Yes.
know, that's in this day and age, there's a lot competing for people's attention. And I don't know how high a U.S. Senate debate is going to rank for a lot of folks.
Well, people watch them, but you don't, I mean, typically, with some very, very notable exceptions, you know, candidates don't really win debates so much as they survive them or they lose them.
Well,
and
you know,
a loss is that viral moment.
Yeah, but I think
you know,
in this one, though, I think both candidates did extremely well. I can't remember a better debate with Michigan people. I thought this debate was more exciting than the VP debate. I thought it was more substantive than the presidential debate. I thought they both looked better than actually any of the four that I just mentioned. I felt like if you watched this debate and you liked Slotkin and you liked Rogers, you came away thinking, God, I'm so glad I liked this person because they excelled. I thought it was a top-tier debate. I thought they both did well. They were sharp. They were quick. It was fast-paced. That hour moved. And I wanted more, which I can't say the same for with the VP debate and the presidential debate.
Well, it's sort of like watching Off the Record, don't you think?
Yeah, it was very much like so, yeah.
But did anybody change their mind? You're absolutely right. This debates reinforce you're good guy or bad guy or good woman, bad woman.
You know, I'm not sure anybody would have changed their mind based off watching that, but I could see people making up their mind. If you're sort of on the bubble and you're sort of thinking, I don't really know, like Alyssa Slotkin and Mike Rogers, you know, I've heard both those names. Maybe I've even voted for both those names in the past, depending on where you live in the state. I could see you having watched that and that having made your decision a little bit easier.
Well, if the polling data is correct, her 7 or 8 point lead has evaporated.
I am hesitant to believe that that's the case. I mean, has it gotten smaller? More than likely, yes. I mean, I do believe that we are at a closer dead heat race. I mean, we're one of 3 toss-up Senate races in the whole country, and we've been that way this entire time. So do I believe that lead has gotten smaller? Yes. Do I believe that it is, you know, evaporated completely? I'm not so certain. Alyssa Slotkin has a lot more recent of a track record, which, you know, gives her a lot of ammunition to Mike Rogers against her. It's been a long time for Rogers. People are a little more familiar with Slotkin. It's not really all that you know, surprising to me that you know, a couple more people recognize her.
You know, 7 out of the last U.S. Senate elections have been won by a Democrat, so you would think that she would have the edge going in. But I will say the Republicans and their supporters have been putting in a lot of money into this race. And
$20 million last week.
Yeah, and the most recent, I looked at Ad Impact yesterday night, and it was $83 million for pro-Slotkin and $80 million for Rogers. I don't think
that's a tie game.
We didn't really think that was going to happen, but the spending is there, and the ads for Rogers are very good. It could be a dead heat. If the national race here in Michigan is a dead heat, this one could be as well.
I was surprised that she did not do a compare and contrast on which is the real Mike Rogers when it comes to Donald Trump. His name was never mentioned in this debate. I was for Donald Trump before I was against him. Isn't that an issue to be exploited for Trump people who are saying, well, wait a minute, this guy's not a Trumper?
I would submit that the debate was a pretty, for both candidates, was a pretty disciplined operation, that they came in with some specific messages that they wanted to deliver, you know, vis-a-vis, you know, some oppositional messaging. But like I think everyone said, that for some people, you know, the debate is doing your due diligence to, you know, feel like you've examined, you know, both the candidates, their records, compared and contrasted and all of that. But, you know, most of this is going to be an ad war. And that's really the place where, you know, you can do, you know, the side-by-side, the appearances together. And I think that that's where you'll see more of that.
So in other words, you don't like my idea that she should have brought up Trump?
I just don't know that it would have made that big of a difference.
It just wasn't on the menu. I mean, maybe we'll see that for the XYZ debate. She was more interested in making sure people knew that he could not have voted on Proposal 3 because he was in Florida. We got that message down pat. And maybe she moves on to Trump next time. But maybe is connecting him to Trump a bad thing? I mean, if the polls are close right now, maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing.
I think this is a race that's almost unusual in today's election landscape, where both candidates are trying to convince people to vote for them. And I know that sounds silly, but a lot of campaigns right now run on turning out your base. They're not focused on courting people or winning them over over with your ideas. And this is sort of an old school campaign in that regard.
Well,
It's a really good point.
Well, and that's what makes me wonder too. When after the VP debate, as a bit of a snoozer as it may have been, a lot of people walked out of it saying, "Wow, that was really civil, like civil to the point of almost being boring." And I do wonder. Well, no, honestly though, I mean, you think about the last 8 years and what how hectic it's been.
There hasn't been one of those.
Right, and so I do honestly wonder too if that's a part of this equation here is them trying to avoid the whole mud flinging, bringing themselves into he said, she said, Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, blah blah blah. Let's just focus on the merits of these candidates, and it seems that both of them are on that same page.
All right, so let's turn to the presidential race. Still tied, according to the Detroit News and WDIV, and also the university out on the East Coast tied. Any surprise there?
Well, we had it too with Mitchell. Mitchell
Yes,
said
I'm
it was
sorry,
tight as well. Yeah,
apologize
that's
for
okay. It just, I guess we're just so split down the middle in this state. And I guess you're seeing that also in the battleground states as well, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. And it's coming down to the wire.
Well, what do you all think of Mr. Trump's strategy of trying to find Republicans who are asleep and not voting and waking them up and getting to the polls rather than pivoting to get independent voters?
Look, he's had some success in getting people out to the polls who wouldn't normally come to the polls. That's how he won in 2016. I think the third time around, that's a harder and harder case to make. Those people have turned out for him in 2016, many in 2020. I just think you get sort of diminishing returns if you keep pursuing that same strategy.
Also, and I'm not seeing a lot of evidence that that's changed, is before Biden dropped out, most of the public opinion research that I'm aware of had Trump kind of plateauing in terms of public support. And so, I mean, really, the ball game for the Republicans in the Trump campaign was exactly that: voter turnout, more supporter turnout.
But it's the voters who haven't voted. That's the key. That's who he's going after. To get them motivated, okay?
But there's a difference between the voters who haven't voted or haven't voted yet versus the undecided on which candidate they want to vote for. And the Republican strategy has been getting more Republicans out to vote.
Or getting people out who haven't voted in a long, long time and convincing them that Trump's their guy.
Well, and so one of the big things that actually jumped out to me about that polling is it was something like almost a third of the Michigan residents that were polled said they had little to no confidence in the election system itself. And so you have to wonder, too, you're trying to reach out to all these people who don't vote, who haven't voted, who might have strayed away from the party a little bit. But for the last several years, all you've done is sown distrust in an election system. If I'm somebody who genuinely believes that, why would I go out to vote? Why would I send in my mail-in ballot? Why wouldn't I think, well, this party's going to cheat, that party's going to cheat because my guy said they're going to cheat? What incentive are you giving voters to turn out, frankly?
Brilliant. It leads me into this next soundbite. Watch this, boys and girls. Well, some politicians argue that elections in Michigan can be rigged. 77% of Michigan voters disagree. They are confident about the integrity of Michigan's elections. 61% of Mr. Trump's Michigan supporters say they do have confidence in the process, but 1 out of 4, 25% of Mr. Trump's voters do not. However, veteran Michigan pollster Richard Zuba found that when voters are told there are 12 security measures now in place, including video cameras at every drop box for votes, the confidence level across the state skyrockets, including Mr. Trump's troops.
All 12 increased the confidence of voters by 75% or more. All 12 actions. And I said earlier how the Trump voters were particularly lack confidence. Look at their numbers. They're enormous. Nearly everyone is above 80 to 85%, most in the 90s, increasing confidence.
That is good news for 2 former Michigan governors and other officials who are part of the Democracy Defense Project, hoping to reassure citizens that voting in Michigan is on the up and up.
But we're committed to helping make sure in our state people trust our voting and support our local people who are working in all these elections, and so we can get the accurate, honorable count.
Former Republican Governor John Engler says the intent here is to
avoid some of the conspiracy theories that are out there in social media, the protections that would stop one who's not entitled, to stop them from voting, and to make sure that once the votes are cast, they're counted appropriately and accurately.
Meanwhile, on the election integrity front, some Republicans are suing Democratic Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson for advising local clerks that a person who has never resided in Michigan can still vote here if their spouse or parent does live here. The Republican plaintiffs argue that is simply unconstitutional. But the good news is, if the polling data is correct, a whole bunch of Michigan voters believe that state and local officials are doing all they can to run a fair election to prevent any post-election, rigged election charges.
Kyle, did you believe that the Trump voters, once told that there are safeguards, are now on board?
Yes. Yeah, I do, because most Trump people who believe that the election was stolen or rigged don't know why it was rigged or stolen. They don't know specifically what happened. They may have conspiracy theories rolling around in their head, but they don't know exactly why. And so then when confronted with the safeguards that are actually in place that they don't know existed beforehand, they're like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense, because now they're actually thinking about, they're engaging in it, maybe for the first time, because they just didn't know what the process was and thought that it was open for corruption.
I think education is really important here. I always come back to, the Giuliani hearing in Michigan. Someone testified during that hearing about the votes coming in batches, and that was suspicious. And it's like, no, that's a precinct. That's literally how we count votes, right? So I do think that the more you can do to sort of lay that baseline of just how elections work and how they are secured and what efforts are made and what checks and balances exist, I think the more people trust the process.
Let's not forget that every Republican and every Trump voter is not an election denier. It's a segment of
about 25%, give or take,
which is significant, especially when you have a very tight election, especially at the presidential level, when you're going to have a very crowded ballot and people will have options other than the Republican and the Democratic Party nominees. And so I think, as has been stated multiple times around this table, that also Republicans have a problem that they've got to persuade registered voters they've been told for a while now don't trust the election system, that they ought to trust the election system.
Especially the absentee ballot. Didn't Mr. Trump at some point say that thing was rigged?
Yes. And now they're saying now it's safe and secure. Did you see the Michigan Republican Party are putting out flyers that now say early voting is safe and secure with Donald Trump's face on it? A completely different change.
Well, yeah, because surprisingly, when you tell people that a certain method of voting isn't safe and secure, unsurprisingly, you lose a lot with that specific metric. So, it was pretty silly to begin with, this level of sowing distrust in our election system, just speaking frankly here, because obviously this was always going to come back and bite you in the butt. You can't say that something is, wrong and bad, but please still do it. That's never worked anywhere at any point in time. Now, obviously, with this polling that suggests that if voters have more education, they're more inclined to be able to say, yes, okay, our election system is safe. Will this be too little too late, frankly? It's October. Ballots are already going out and back in. Heck, some early voting sites will open up, I believe, as early as next week. We are already seeing people cast their ballots, and this is the time where we're putting the rubber to the road, and we're going to figure out whether or not this message is being received.
All right, so Donald Trump comes into Detroit yesterday, speaks to the prestigious Detroit Economic Club, and he did what?
Well, way over schedule. I'm going to start there.
Let's start with the Detroit analogy.
Yeah. So, he made several comments about Detroit that were a little less than flattering. One really flattering, one later on. But I think the one that stuck out to people was that he told people that if Kamala Harris wins this election, that the whole country is going to look like Detroit. And he said that in sort of a negative way, obviously making a bad comparison.
Come up with sort of?
Definitely a negative way, making a bad comparison. So.
You led with the headline on that.
Yeah, I did lead with the headline on it, because I don't know you're spitting in the face of the people who you're talking to. I just don't understand the strategy in that. This is the Detroit Economic Club, and you're telling people that the entire country is going to look like your city if Kamala Harris is elected. How do you not take that the wrong way, or take that as a negative?
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's such a dated reference where, back in the 90s, people would be like, oh, Detroit, negative. But you made a great point actually the other day online, where it's obviously the city is doing so much better. The city is on the up and up. But you also have these suburbanites who are coming down into Detroit, who are spending their money, who now have a kinship with, hey, how about them Lions? TIGs are hot. We have a lot of good sports teams going on. We have a lot of great building going on down there, economic development. There are people now who are coming into the city who are not, native Detroiters who now feel a sense of kinship for that city. And, we look back at Trump losing with, for instance, suburban women. I'm drawing a comparison here where if you're spitting in the face of this city where 20 years ago that might have made a difference, now you're angering a lot more people than you think you are.
Somebody said, if you're, go ahead.
And if your plan is, as the Republicans are, is to go into places where maybe they won't win, a la the city of Detroit, but to lose by less, well, I mean, you've just stepped on your own game plan there.
Somebody said it's like going out on your first date and wanting to impress your date, and then halfway through the date saying, oh, by the way, you've got bad breath.
I think that's a good analogy. I also liked, in some way, I think it's very similar to this statue that was unveiled yesterday that Emily helped us all experience, was there. This naked Donald Trump, 40-foot statue of Donald Trump with no clothes on. The analogy being that the emperor has no clothes. And so when he comes in and talks about Kamala Harris's record and how his was so much better, you've got this statue here that shows, does he really project any strength? Is he really the commander that he says he is, or is he the emperor with no clothes?
Put that speech in the context of the Detroit Lions looking really good, the Tigers struggling to get in the World Series, and not a peep about that.
Listen, I mean...
But here's the ultimate question. Does it make any difference?
No,
the consensus is no.
I disagree. Remember, if this election in Michigan is as close as we think it may be...
Who sat and said that was wrong and will change my vote?
Every little bit matters. If the margins are thin, then votes for Robert Kennedy matter. If you've disillusioned some Detroiters, especially the black male Detroiters that the Trump campaign is courting, then that makes a difference. Is that you don't want to misstep at this point in the campaign to have to adjust your plans after that.
Well, that's the thing. He's only won Michigan once, and that was by 10,000 votes. And so, to your point,
and it wasn't more than 50%.
No, and to that point, I mean, every single vote matters. And I mean, it goes the opposite way, too. Obviously, Democrats have a lot to reckon with the ongoing Israel-Gaza war. But you go and you spit in the face of, to your point, I mean, the Trump campaign has been trying to court, especially like black rappers, big name people down in the city to try and spread, hey, vote for Trump. Why would I want to do that now if you're out here bad-mouthing the city I love and grew up in?
Especially with that audience. I mean, those people are invested into what's happening in Detroit.
Most real politicians would have said, you guys are doing some great things here in Detroit. I've been here 20 years ago. I was here now. I hardly recognize it. You're doing great things, great job. And Trump goes the other way. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think where it could potentially hurt him is actually those suburban communities where he's counting on margins, right? Like, you look at a place like Oakland County that did trend Republican for many years and has since solidly sort of moved bluer and bluer. If you're the Republican Party, you're hoping that Trump can pick up just some number of votes there, right? Like you're hoping that maybe he outperforms what he did there in 2020. And I think it's hard to make that case when you're also coming in and saying, hey, this city that you visit all the time, that you love the sports teams, that you make a weekend out of, that maybe you've even bought a condo to spend weekends in some cases.
All right, there was one.
Not worth it.
To your point is the people it's not going to persuade, even if they're offended by the message, are the Republicans who are going to say that's just Trump being Trump.
Well, but does Trump being Trump help him?
I mean, not in that context, but the people that it's not going to hurt him with are the people who are still going to say, my point.
Okay, all right, so it's some loss. I mean, there's no gain there.
There is some loss on the persuadable side, but potentially, yeah.
Quickly, the polling data continues to say that Trump does better with voters who are concerned about the economy. She does better with the abortion issue. My question to you is, which one is the cutting edge issue that maybe decides this election?
I don't think either one does. I think this is an issue of personalities and not one of actual votes. And people are gravitated toward the strength that Trump projects, or they're not, or they like kind of this new vision, this new face that Kamala Harris brings. And maybe the pocketbook things work on the margins with some people, and maybe abortion brings some women out to vote who wouldn't normally vote. But I think most people are voting on personality.
I mean, same kind of cop-out answer. Everybody has wallets. The economy hurts. Well, the thing, I mean, I don't want to call it a cop-out. I'm sorry, but it kind of is. You asked a yes or no question, but no.
Time for rebuttals. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, and I apologize. Not cop-out.
No, it's a cheap shot. Go ahead.
Not a cheap shot. I'm so sorry. But still, no. The economy impacts everybody to that point, but abortion is a huge driving issue for women. That being said, I do agree with Kyle in that I don't really know if these are going to be the things that actually do end up driving people out to the polls. A lot of this is going to be a contest of personality. A lot of people either know I'm backing Trump and he could, throw somebody off the Empire State Building and I'd still back Trump. I'm backing Harris. I could throw somebody off the, Golden Gate Bridge and I'd still back her. And so whether or not they move the needle on this, I think it's really just a focus on whether or not there's faux pas in the next month.
Emily.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that people already have a general sense of who these candidates are, which is somewhat of a feat for Harris, who really, obviously had a very short season with which to impart that. But I do think that people are sort of, have made up their minds and are looking for ways to explain it to people. So maybe the economy's that, maybe abortion's that, but.
Well, I mean, which portion of the economy, if you're talking about? If it's housing costs, sure. If it's jobs numbers, well, you know what? That's improving.
So look at Proposal 3. Didn't we all agree around this table that when Proposal 3 was on the ballot, that was a determining factor in the race for governor? All right, now Prop 3 is not on the ballot, but abortion, the issue, is still alive in Michigan. Is it not? Huh?
Depends on who you ask, I suppose.
All right, okay.
Democrats will keep trying to make it.
All right, let's wrap it up. Thanks to all of you. Great show. Think should we put this on the air? See you next week for more Off the Record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Martin Waymeyer, a full-service strategic communications agency, partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and public policy engagement. Learn more at martinwaymeyer.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan Public Television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.